I still feel the pressure changes in my joints when a storm rolls in. 73 years old now, and my body's become a barometer for something that has nothing to do with weather. The doctors call it arthritis. I know better. They see the x-rays, point to the deterioration in my knees and shoulders, prescribe their pills and their physical therapy. They don't see what I see when I close my eyes. 17 points of pressure, synchronized, pulsing in a rhythm that hasn't changed in 37 years. My daughter thinks I'm losing it. She's probably right in a way. Last month she found me in the garage at 3 in the morning, ear pressed against the concrete floor, listening. She asked what I was doing. I couldn't tell her the truth, that sometimes I swear I can hear it through the earth itself, that deep rhythmic breathing that comes from miles down. So I lied. Said I thought I heard a water leak. She's looking into assisted living facilities now. I've seen the brochures on her kitchen counter. Let her look. I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I know that what happened in that valley in 1987 wasn't mass hallucination or methane poisoning or any of the other lies they wrote into the official reports. It was 1987. I was 29 years old, fresh off a divorce, throwing myself into work because it was easier than dealing with the wreckage of my personal life. I was a structural engineer with Cascadia Geothermal Solutions, a mid-sized company out of Portland that specialized in deep earth surveying. We mapped geothermal reservoirs for potential energy extraction. This was the tail end of the energy crisis, and alternative sources were the new gold rush. If you could find a hot spot with the right geology, you could make millions. The Mendocino site was supposed to be routine. 3 weeks in Northern California's coastal mountains, taking seismic readings from a vent system discovered by a logging company the previous year. They'd been doing a survey for a new access road when their equipment started acting up, compasses spinning, GPS units losing signal, radio interference across all frequencies. One of their geologists had stumbled across the vents while trying to figure out what was causing the disturbances. The company classified the find, kept it quiet, and sold the coordinates to Cascadia for what I heard was a substantial sum. That should have been my first warning. Logging companies don't just hand over potential geothermal sites. They develop them, lease them, partner up. They don't sell them outright unless there's something wrong. The briefing was held in Director Graves' office on a Tuesday morning in late September. I remember the date because it was my ex-wife's birthday, and I'd spent the previous evening debating whether to call her. I didn't. Went to a bar instead, had 3 whiskeys too many, and showed up to the briefing with a headache that made the fluorescent lights feel like ice picks behind my eyes. Graves was waiting with the folders already laid out. He was 56, had been with Cascadia since its founding, and had the kind of worn-down look that came from decades of corporate pressure and budget meetings. His hands shook slightly as he distributed the documents, a tremor I'd noticed before but never really registered. Later, I'd understand what that tremor meant. It was fear, carefully controlled but never quite suppressed. "Gentlemen, ladies," he nodded to Chen and Dr. Akoy as they entered. "Thank you for coming on short notice. We have an opportunity that requires immediate mobilization." The folder contained topographic maps, preliminary seismic data, and a site assessment from the previous survey team. I flipped through it while Graves began his presentation. The vent system was located in a remote section of the King Range, about 40 miles inland from the coast. 17 distinct vents arranged in what the report described as an unusual but not unprecedented geological formation. Previous team reported equipment malfunctions, Graves said, advancing to the next slide. It showed a graph of radio interference patterns, regular, rhythmic pulses across multiple frequencies, magnetometer irregularities, compass deviations, some issues with their seismic sensors, probably just mineral deposits affecting the instruments. Heavy concentrations of iron or nickel can create localized magnetic fields that interfere with. "What happened to that team?" Chen interrupted. She was our geophysicist, 40 years old with a PhD from Caltech and a reputation for not suffering fools. Her field notebooks were legendary, color-coded, cross-referenced, so meticulously organized that grad students used to study them as examples of proper documentation. She sat at the far end of the conference table, already taking notes. Graves paused, just for a second, but it was enough. They completed their survey, declared the site unsuitable for development. On what grounds? That was Okoye, our lead geologist. Dr. Michael Okoye, originally from Nigeria, educated at Oxford, 23 years with various survey companies. He had a wife, Amara, and 3 kids, 2 daughters in college, a son in high school. He showed everyone their photos. Every single person he met got to see pictures of his family. It was endearing in a way that would haunt me later. Geological instability, Graves said. Potential for seismic activity, but we think they were overly cautious. The seismic data they collected was incomplete, and their methodology, he trailed off, shuffling papers. Well, we think they missed something significant. The thermal readings suggest a substantial reservoir, possibly one of the largest undeveloped geothermal systems in California. I should have pressed him on that. Should have asked why, if the site was so promising, the previous team had been so quick to abandon it. Should have wondered why Cascadia was sending out a new team barely 6 months after the first survey. But I was hungover and my ex-wife's voice was still echoing in my head from our last argument, and I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my empty apartment. So I stayed quiet. The team assembled over the next 48 hours. 12 of us in total, 6 engineers including myself, 3 geologists, 2 security personnel, and a medic named Rodriguez. The other engineers were a mixed group. Patterson was the youngest, 24, fresh out of Texas A&M with a geology degree and dreams of striking it rich in rare earth mineral exploration. Kid had enthusiasm that bordered on manic. He talked constantly, asked endless questions, and had a habit of touching everything like a curious child. The senior engineers, Hendricks and Yao, were both in their 40s, experienced hands who'd worked sites from Iceland to New Zealand. They kept to themselves mostly, speaking when spoken to, doing their jobs with quiet competence. Then there were the 2 junior engineers, Marcus and Thompson. Marcus was former Navy, had done subsurface mapping work for oceanographic surveys. Quiet guy, efficient, the kind of person you wanted on your team because he just got things done without drama. Thompson was his opposite, nervous energy, always checking and rechecking his equipment, triple verifying calculations. I'd worked with him on a project in Oregon the year before. Good engineer, but high-strung. The geological team consisted of Okoye, Sanders, and Park. Sanders was ex-military, had done geological survey work for the Army Corps of Engineers before going private sector. Mid-30s, built like a linebacker, with a dry sense of humor that helped diffuse tension. Park was the youngest of the geologists at 31, Korean-American, educated at Berkeley. She specialized in volcanic systems and had published several papers on geothermal reservoir dynamics. Security was Miller and Kovacs, both ex-military, Miller from Army Rangers, Kovacs from Marine Force Recon. Cascadia had started including security personnel on remote surveys after an incident in Guatemala where a team had encountered drug traffickers using an isolated valley as a processing site. Miller was the lead, 38, built like he'd been carved from granite. He had a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, courtesy of an IED in Kandahar. Kovacs was younger, maybe 30, quieter than Miller, but with the same coiled readiness that marked professional soldiers. And then there was Rodriguez, our medic. Carlos Rodriguez was 26, had worked Antarctic research stations for 3 seasons, which meant he was qualified to handle extreme remote medicine. He was the kind of guy who couldn't sit still, always moving, fidgeting, checking and rechecking his medical supplies. He told me once that the constant motion helped with anxiety, that if he stopped moving he started thinking too much. I understood that impulse. We became friends over the equipment checks, bonding over our shared tendency to use work as a distraction from life. The company flew us commercial to Sacramento, then chartered a smaller plane to Eureka. From there, Helicopters took us the rest of the way, 2 Hueys loaded with personnel and equipment, flying over terrain that got progressively more remote with each passing mile. 40 miles inland from the coast, deep into mountain territory, where the old-growth forest grew so thick the canopy blocked out the sky. I was in the second helicopter with Chen, Akoy, and half the equipment. Chen spent the flight reviewing data on a laptop, occasionally making notes. Akoy stared out the window, and I noticed his hand kept going to his jacket pocket where he kept the photos of his family. "First time in this region?" I asked him, raising my voice over the rotor noise. He shook his head. "Worked a site about 20 miles north in '82. Volcanic survey, nothing came of it, but I remember the terrain. It's old, really old. The geology here predates most of the coastal formation. You can see it in the rock layers. There are formations exposed that should be buried under thousands of feet of sediment." "How is that possible?" "Uplift maybe, or erosion, or," he paused, looking back out the window, "or something else entirely. The Pacific Northwest has geology that doesn't always follow the rules. Subduction zones, volcanic activity, earthquake faults. The earth here is restless." The helicopter banked sharply, and through the window I caught my first glimpse of the valley. It shouldn't have existed. I say that as someone who spent 20 years studying geology, who understands how terrain forms, how mountains rise and erode and reshape themselves over millions of years. The valley we were approaching violated every principle I'd learned. It was a perfect bowl, half a mile across, ringed by ridges that rose 200 feet above the valley floor in almost perfect symmetry. The ridges themselves were strange, too uniform, too regular, like they'd been constructed rather than formed by natural processes. But what made my stomach clench was the forest. Old-growth redwood and Douglas fir covered the mountains as far as I could see in every direction, massive trees, some of them probably 1,000 years old. But at the ridge line surrounding the valley, they just stopped. Not gradually, not thinning out over distance. They stopped at a precise line, as if someone had drawn a circle and decreed that nothing would grow beyond that point. The valley floor itself was bare rock, dark stone, almost black, smooth and unmarked except for the vents. 17 of them. Circular openings in the stone, each approximately 6 feet in diameter, arranged in a pattern I couldn't immediately parse. They weren't random, that much was obvious. There was intentionality to their placement, a geometric precision that made my engineer's brain itch with the need to understand the underlying structure. The pilot brought us down on the southern rim, setting down in a clearing about 50 yards from the tree line. The first helicopter was already down, and Miller's team was establishing a perimeter. I climbed out into air that immediately felt wrong. It was late September and we were at significant elevation, should have been cool, probably in the 50s. Instead, the air was warm, not hot but warm enough to be noticeable, and it smelled strange, not sulfur which would have been expected from a geothermal system. This was something else entirely, metallic, almost electric like the air before a lightning strike, and beneath that something organic, old decay but not quite rot, something that had been dead for a very long time. Chen was already unpacking equipment, moving with practiced efficiency. "We need to set up the seismic array first," she called out. "Get baseline readings before we do anything else." Akoy was standing at the rim looking down into the valley. I joined him, following his gaze. From ground level, the symmetry was even more pronounced. The valley was almost perfectly circular, and the stone of the valley floor had a quality that bothered me. It was too smooth, too uniform. Natural rock has variation, different mineral deposits, erosion patterns, cracks and fissures from thermal expansion and contraction. This looked like it had been poured and polished. "What do you think?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Finally, "I think we should be careful, very careful. The vents, among other things." He pointed to the nearest vent, about 100 yards down the slope from our position. "You see the rim, how it's beveled?" I looked, he was right. The edge of the vent wasn't rough or broken. It was smoothly beveled like it had been machined. Could be weathering. Could be, but his tone said he didn't believe it any more than I did. We set up base camp over the next 4 hours. Standard procedure for a 3-week survey. Prefab shelters that we'd brought in via helicopter, arranged in a loose cluster on the southern rim. Communications tent with satellite uplink and radio equipment. Equipment storage. Medical facility. Mess hall. Generator setup for power. Miller and Kovacs established a perimeter, marking it with motion sensors and cameras. Overkill for a geological survey, but after the Guatemala incident, Cascadia didn't take chances. By the time we finished, it was approaching sunset. The light in the valley was strange. The surrounding ridges cast long shadows, but the valley floor seemed to hold illumination longer than it should have, as if the dark stone was somehow retaining and reflecting light. We gathered for dinner in the mess hall, prepackaged meals heated on camp stoves, coffee from a percolator, the kind of utilitarian sustenance that marked field work. Patterson was in high spirits, talking excitedly about the site's potential. If this is as big as the thermal readings suggest, we could be looking at a revolutionary find. California's energy future right here. Yao, one of the senior engineers, was less enthusiastic. Seen promising sites before. Half of them turn out to be inaccessible or economically unviable. Let's get the full survey data before we start celebrating. You're such a pessimist, Patterson said, grinning. I'm a realist, there's a difference. Chen was reviewing the initial seismic data on her laptop, frowning. I moved to look over her shoulder. Problem. Maybe we're getting some odd readings. Could be equipment calibration, but she pulled up a graph showing seismic activity. There's a rhythmic pattern, regular pulses about 1 every 40 seconds. Geothermal systems pulse, Akoy said. He'd come over to look at the data. Pressure builds, releases, builds again. It's normal. Sure, but not usually this regular. This is almost metronomic, and it's coming from all 17 vents simultaneously, which suggests they're all connected to the same reservoir. That would make sense, I said. They're probably accessing a single magma chamber or hot aquifer. The regularity is interesting, but maybe there's a natural valve system that regulates pressure release. Chen didn't look convinced, but she nodded. We'll get better data tomorrow when I deploy the deep sensors. The conversation moved on to logistics, work schedules, equipment deployment, safety protocols. Standard pre-survey briefing. But I noticed Akoy remained quiet, occasionally glancing toward the tent entrance, toward the valley beyond. After dinner, most of the team turned in early. Long day of travel and setup, and we had hard work ahead. I stayed up reviewing the topographic maps, trying to understand the valley's formation. No matter how I looked at it, the geology didn't make sense. The surrounding mountains were clearly part of the regional coastal range, standard subduction zone geology, ancient ocean floor thrust upward by tectonic forces, but the valley itself was different. The rock was older, darker, and its crystalline structure suggested formation under extreme pressure and heat. Like it had been forged. I was putting away the maps when Rodriguez appeared at the entrance. You still up? Can't sleep, you. He shook his head. Too wired. Always happens first night on a new site. Want to take a walk? I'm going to check the perimeter sensors. I should have said no. Should have gone to bed, gotten rest, started fresh in the morning. But the air in the tent felt stifling and I needed to move. Sure. We grabbed flashlights and headed out into the night. The temperature had dropped significantly, probably down into the 40s now, and our breath fogged in the beam of the flashlights. The sky was clear, stars brilliant in the absence of light pollution. A quarter moon provided just enough ambient light to see by. Rodriguez led the way toward the western perimeter, checking motion sensors as we went. Everything was functional, batteries good, fields of detection clear. Professional work by Miller and Kovacs. We were about 50 yards from the rim when Rodriguez stopped. "You hear that?" I listened, at first nothing. Then I caught it, a low sound barely audible right at the edge of perception. Not quite mechanical, not quite organic, a steady rhythm. "The vents," I suggested. "Yeah, but listen, they're synchronized." He was right. Every 40 seconds, Chen's data had been precise. All 17 vents exhaled. I could see it now, visible in the cold night air. 17 columns of vapor rising perfectly vertical despite the wind that was causing the trees on the ridge to sway. "Pressure equalization," I said. "They're all connected underground, so when pressure builds in the reservoir, it vents uniformly across all outlets." Rodriguez was walking toward the rim, and I followed. We stood there looking down into the valley. The moonlight made the dark stone almost luminous, and the vents appeared as deeper shadows against it. The vapor columns rose in perfect unison, dissipating about 30 feet up. "I'm going to go down there," Rodriguez said suddenly. "What, why?" "One of the perimeter sensors is showing a weak battery. It's at the valley floor, near vent number 4. He pulled out a small device, a GPS unit showing the location of all our sensors. "Should only take a few minutes to swap it out." "Can't it wait until morning?" "I won't be able to sleep knowing there's a gap in our perimeter." He was already starting down the slope, moving carefully over the loose rock. "Come on, 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. I followed because it seemed ridiculous to let him go alone. The slope was steeper than it looked from the rim, and we had to move carefully to avoid loose stones. It took us about 10 minutes to reach the valley floor, and the moment my boots touched that smooth, dark stone, I felt it. Pressure, not physical pressure, but something deeper. A sensation of weight that had nothing to do with gravity. Like the air itself was denser here, or like we'd descended into water, and my body was registering the change even though my eyes said we were still on dry land. Rodriguez felt it too. I could see it in the way he moved, more carefully now, his usual nervous energy dampened by something like caution. The sensor was about 100 feet away near vent 4. We approached slowly, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The vent was exactly like the others, 6 feet in diameter, beveled edges, descending at an angle into the earth. I knelt at the rim and shone my light into it. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and they reflected the light in strange ways. The tunnel descended at approximately 45 degrees. I could estimate that from years of experience, and I could see about 20 feet down before the angle and darkness obscured the rest. Rodriguez was swapping out the sensor battery, working quickly. "There, that should." He stopped, stood perfectly still. "What?" "The vents, they stopped breathing." I looked, he was right. The vapor columns had ceased, all 17 vents silent and still. I checked my watch. We'd been on the valley floor for maybe 3 minutes, and the 40-second cycle should have produced at least 4 exhalations. None had come. "We should go," Rodriguez said quietly. I didn't argue. We backed away from vent 4, moving quickly but trying not to run. The pressure sensation increased as we moved, not decreased, as I would have expected if it was related to proximity to the vents. It was like something was watching us, weighing us, deciding. We were halfway back to the slope when the vents exhaled. All of them, simultaneously. But this time it wasn't vapor. It was sound. A low-frequency vibration that I felt in my chest cavity, in my bones, in my teeth. Not quite mechanical, not quite organic. Something that existed in between, something that resonated with the calcium in my skeleton and made every joint ache with sudden, sharp pain. We ran. Scrambling up the slope, loose stones sliding under our feet, flashlights swinging wildly. Behind us, the sound continued, that deep, resonant exhalation that seemed to come from the earth itself. It lasted for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Then silence. We reached the rim gasping, hearts pounding. Behind us, the valley was still and quiet again. The vents had resumed their normal pattern, 40-second cycles, gentle vapor columns. What the hell was that? Rodriguez's voice was shaking. I didn't answer because I didn't have an answer. We returned to camp in silence, checked in with the night watch Thompson, who'd seen nothing unusual, and went to our respective tents. But I didn't sleep. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to my own heartbeat, feeling the echo of that sound still resonating in my bones. The next morning I said nothing about the incident. Rodriguez did the same. We exchanged glances over breakfast, a silent agreement to keep it to ourselves until we understood it better. Looking back, that was a mistake. We should have reported it immediately, should have demanded an explanation or a shutdown. But we were professionals, trained to document and analyze, not to panic at the first anomaly. Chen deployed the deep seismic sensors that morning, placing them in a grid pattern around the vents. The process took several hours. Each sensor had to be carefully positioned, calibrated, and tested. I helped her with the technical setup while Akoy supervised the geological team's preliminary sample collection. Patterson was in his element, practically bouncing from vent to vent with sample collection kits. He'd rigged a small drone with a camera and was flying it over the valley, taking aerial photographs of the vent pattern. "Look at this," he called out, waving us over to his laptop. The drone footage showed the 17 vents from above, and from this angle the pattern was unmistakable. They formed a spiral. Not a simple spiral, a logarithmic spiral, the kind found in nautilus shells and galaxy formations. The vents started with a central point, Vent 1, and spiraled outward with mathematical precision, each subsequent vent positioned at an angle and distance that followed the golden ratio. "That's impossible," Chen said flatly. "Natural geological formations don't follow mathematical constants." "Could be coincidence," Yao suggested. "Pattern recognition and random distribution. Humans see patterns even when none exist." "This isn't random." Chen pulled up a mathematical model. "The deviation from a perfect logarithmic spiral is less than 0.5%. That's not coincidence. That's design." "Design by what?" That was Miller. He'd been listening from the perimeter and now he approached the group. "You're saying something made this?" Chen didn't answer immediately. Finally, "I'm saying it's not natural. Whether it was made by something or is the result of some geological process we don't understand yet, I can't say. But it's not random." Graves arrived on the late morning supply helicopter, along with 2 company executives I'd never met. They spent an hour in the communications tent, presumably reviewing our initial data. Then Graves called a briefing. "Good work so far," he said, though his hands were shaking worse than before. "The board is very pleased with the preliminary findings. The thermal signature here is even stronger than we'd hoped. We're going to extend the survey to 4 weeks, bring in additional drilling equipment to verify reservoir depth and composition." "We need to talk about the pattern," Akoy said. "The vent arrangement, it's not natural." Graves waved this away. "Geothermal systems often form along fissure lines. It's not unusual to see linear or curved patterns. The spiral shape is interesting but not unprecedented." "With all due respect, sir, this level of precision is absolutely unprecedented." Akoy pulled out Patterson's aerial photographs. "This is mathematical, deliberate." "Nature is full of mathematical patterns, Dr. Akoy. Fractals, spirals, geometric formations. The Giant's Causeway in Ireland, the Devil's Postpile in California, perfectly hexagonal basalt columns formed by cooling lava. What we're seeing here is similar. Unusual, certainly, but not impossible." "And the previous team's assessment," that was Sanders, "they declared this site unsuitable. Why?" Graves' expression hardened. "The previous team was led by a geologist who panicked over some equipment malfunctions. He filed an alarmist report that nearly cost this company its contract with the state. We've reviewed his findings thoroughly and they don't hold up to scrutiny. That's why you're here, to do a proper, professional assessment." The briefing continued, but I noticed Chen and Akoy exchange glances. They didn't believe Graves any more than I did. But we were professionals, we had contracts, and we weren't in positions to refuse assignments based on gut feelings. The deep surveys began that afternoon. The plan was to lower sensor packages into each vent, mapping the tunnel networks below and collecting temperature, pressure, and gas composition data. Chen supervised while Marcus and I handled the actual deployment, using winches and specialized cable to lower the sensors down into the tunnels. We started with Vent 1, the central point of the spiral. Marcus operated the winch while I monitored the sensor readouts on a laptop. The cable fed out slowly, the sensor descending into darkness. 50 feet. The tunnel maintained its precise 47-degree angle. I'd calculated it from the external measurements and confirmed it now with the sensor's inclinometer. The walls were smooth, consistent diameter, no variation. 100 feet. Temperature rising as expected, pressure increasing slightly. Gas composition showed elevated CO2 levels, some hydrogen sulfide, standard volcanic gases. 200 feet. Still descending, still no variation in tunnel dimensions. The walls showed what the sensor's imaging system described as machining marks, parallel grooves running the length of the tunnel, spiraling gradually, like threads on a screw. "Are you seeing this?" I asked Chen. She was studying the imaging data, her expression growing more troubled. "Those marks, they're uniform, precisely spaced. This wasn't eroded, it was cut." "By what?" "I don't know, some kind of boring tool maybe, but the scale," she trailed off, doing calculations on a separate laptop. "To bore a tunnel this size at this angle with this level of precision, you'd need industrial equipment, heavy machinery. And according to the logging company that found this site, there's no record of any mining or drilling operation in this area. Ever." 400 feet. The temperature was now approaching 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The sensor's camera showed the same smooth walls, the same spiral grooves, the same impossible consistency. 600 feet. We'd reached the limit of our cable. The sensor showed the tunnel continuing beyond, angle unchanged, diameter unchanged. Wherever it led, it went deeper than we could measure with our current equipment. "Bring it up," Chen said. "We'll try a longer cable tomorrow. I want to see how far down these go." We spent the rest of the afternoon repeating the process with vents 2 through 6. Every single one showed identical characteristics. 47-degree angle, 6-foot diameter, smooth walls with spiral machining marks, depths beyond our ability to measure. It was like they'd all been drilled by the same machine, using the same specifications to identical standards. That night the team gathered for dinner in a subdued mood. The excitement of the first day had been replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe unease. Patterson was still enthusiastic, talking about the potential geological discoveries, but even he seemed to sense the others' hesitation. Akoy barely touched his food. I sat next to him, kept my voice low. "You're thinking about the previous team." He nodded. "They saw what we're seeing, the patterns, the precision, the impossibility of it, and they declared it unsuitable and left. What did they know that we don't?" Graves said they panicked. "Graves is lying." He said it flatly, matter-of-factly. "I've worked with him for 6 years. I know when he's hiding something. Those executives who came in today, they're not geologists. They're corporate. Risk management, probably. They're here to assess liability, not mineral potential." "You think Cascadia knows something about this site? Something they're not telling us?" "I think we're not here for a geothermal survey. I think we're here for something else entirely." He pushed his plate away, untouched. "I'm going to go through the previous team's data tonight, really study it, see what they found that scared them so badly." He left the mess hall, heading toward the communications tent where the files were stored. I should have gone with him, should have helped him dig through those reports. Instead, I stayed for coffee, chatted with Rodriguez about nothing important, avoided thinking about the implications of what we were finding. It was the last normal conversation I ever had with him. I woke at 2:47 a.m. to the sound of my tent zipper opening. Rodriguez stuck his head in, illuminated by his flashlight. "You awake?" "I am now. What's wrong?" "I need you to see something. Come on." I dressed quickly and followed him outside. The camp was quiet. Thompson was on watch, everyone else asleep. Rodriguez led me toward the rim, moving quietly. When we reached the edge, he pointed down into the valley. The vents were still breathing in their 40-second rhythm, but something was different. The vapor columns were denser now, more substantial, and they glowed faintly, a pale blue-green bioluminescence that I hadn't seen before. "That started about 20 minutes ago," Rodriguez whispered. "I was doing rounds, saw it from the perimeter. I've been watching since then, and it's getting brighter." He was right. As we watched, the luminescence intensified, pulsing in time with the exhalations. The valley floor itself seemed to be reflecting the light, the dark stone taking on a faint glow. "Should we wake the others?" "I did. Chen's coming. I figured we should document this before we disturb the whole camp." Chen arrived a few minutes later with her camera equipment, immediately starting to photograph the phenomenon. "This is remarkable. That luminescence, it's probably some kind of thermoluminescent bacteria in the vapor. Extremophile organisms that thrive in high-temperature environments. I've seen similar things in deep-sea volcanic vents, but never in a terrestrial system." We watched for another 10 minutes as the glow continued to intensify. Then Chen said, "I'm going down there. I want to collect a vapor sample, see what's causing this." In the middle of the night, Rodriguez sounded uncertain. "The phenomenon might not last until morning. This could be our only chance to study it." She was already preparing collection equipment, sterile sample containers, a portable spectrometer, protective gear. "You two don't have to come. I can handle this alone." But we went with her. Of course we did. That's what teams do. They stick together, they support each other, even when instinct screams to stay away. The descent was easier than the previous night. We knew the path now, knew which stones were loose. We reached the valley floor in 5 minutes, and the glow was even more pronounced from ground level. The light seemed to emanate from the vents themselves, as if something down in those tunnels was generating illumination. Chen approached Vent 4, the same one Rodriguez and I had visited the night before. She set up her equipment, held the sample container in the vapor stream. The light played across her face, giving her features an otherworldly cast. "Temperatures elevated," she called back to us. "About 20 degrees higher than ambient, and the spectrometer is showing. This can't be right." "What?" She checked the device again, reset it, took another reading. "The vapor contains noble gases in concentrations that shouldn't be possible in a terrestrial environment. High levels of helium-3, traces of argon-40, xenon isotopes that don't occur naturally on Earth's surface. This is the kind of gas composition you'd expect from deep mantle material, or what? Or from something that's been sealed underground for an extremely long time, millions of years possibly. Like these vents are releasing gases that have been trapped since." The vents stopped breathing. All of them simultaneously. The glow faded, and we were left in darkness broken only by our flashlights. Chen, Rodriguez, and I stood frozen, waiting. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30, far beyond the normal 40-second cycle. Then the ground vibrated. Not an earthquake. I'd felt earthquakes. This was different, rhythmic, deliberate, like something massive had shifted position far below us. "Go," Chen said quietly. "Right now, go." We ran for the slope, but this time I looked back. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw something that my brain struggled to process. The stone around Vent 4 was moving. Not cracking, not crumbling, moving. Flowing like liquid, reshaping itself. the beveled edge of the vent dilating like a pupil. We scrambled up the slope, stones sliding beneath our feet. Behind us, that deep vibration continued, and I heard Chen sobbing as she climbed, not from fear, but from the pure cognitive dissonance of seeing something impossible. We reached the rim and collapsed, gasping. Behind us, the valley had returned to its normal state, regular 40-second exhalations, faint vapor columns, dark still stone, like nothing had happened. Thompson came running, attracted by our commotion. "What's going on?" I heard. "Equipment malfunction," Chen gasped out. "Spectrometer gave some bad readings, startled us. We're fine." It was a lie, and Thompson probably knew it, but he didn't press. We returned to camp, agreed to say nothing until morning, until we could present our findings to the whole team. But when I finally got back to my tent, I didn't sleep. I lay there feeling that vibration echo through my bones, seeing that impossible stone flow in my mind's eye. At breakfast, Chen reported the vapor analysis to the team. She edited out the part about the stone moving, focusing on the noble gas concentrations. This suggests the vents are accessing an extremely old geological system. We're talking about gases that have been sequestered since possibly the Precambrian era. "How old is that?" Patterson asked. "Over 500 million years, before complex life evolved on Earth." The implications hung in the air. Finally, Sanders spoke up. "So what you're saying is, whatever created these vents, it's been down there for 500 million years." "I'm saying the gases are that old. I'm not making claims about what created the vents." But the doubt was there now, visible in everyone's expressions, except Graves, who joined us for breakfast. He looked almost excited. "This is exactly why we're here, to discover new geological phenomena, expand our understanding. Chen, I want you to prioritize getting sensors deeper into the tunnels today. We need to map the full extent of this system." "Sir, given the anomalies we're encountering, I think we should consider." "Dr. Chen, you have your orders." The morning was devoted to preparing longer cables for the deep surveys. We spliced together multiple lengths, creating a cable system that could potentially reach 1,200 feet down. Marcus, Thompson, and I handled the technical work while Chen set up enhanced monitoring equipment. Patterson volunteered for the overnight sensor watch. We'd established a monitoring station on the valley floor, a prefab shelter with seismic monitors, atmospheric sensors, and communication equipment. 4-hour shifts, radio check-ins every 30 minutes. Patterson took the midnight to 4 slot. His first check-in at 12:30 was normal. Reported stable readings, normal vent activity, no anomalies. His second check-in at 1:00 was normal. Cheerful even, he was excited about some interesting seismic patterns he was tracking. His third check-in at 1:30 was normal. Said he was making coffee, everything quiet. The fourth check-in never came. Miller tried to raise him at 2:00, no response. Tried again at 2:05, 2:10, nothing. He woke me at 2:15. "Patterson's not responding. I'm going down there with Kovacs. You should come, you know the equipment." We dressed quickly, grabbed flashlights and radios, and headed down to the valley floor. The monitoring station was about 200 yards from our position, near Vent 7. As we approached, I could see it was intact, lights still on, door closed, no signs of damage. Miller went in first, weapon drawn despite regulations. The rest of us followed. Patterson's coffee sat on the console, still warm. His jacket hung on the chair back. His radio was on the desk, powered on, set to the correct frequency. His laptop showed the seismic monitors, still recording data. His field notebook was open to his most recent entry, dated 2:03 a.m. Interesting rhythmic pattern in seismic data, almost like a heartbeat. Going to check sensors to rule out mechanical vibration. That was all. We found his boots at the edge of Vent 7. Not scattered, not torn off, placed. Side by side, laces still tied, positioned neatly as if he just stepped out of them. The stone around them showed no marks, no signs of struggle. He wouldn't have walked away from his boots, Miller said. His hand rested on his sidearm. Not out here, not at night, not Patterson. Kid was too cautious. We searched. 6 hours, systematic grid pattern, every inch of the valley floor. We checked every vent, called his name until our voices went hoarse, used thermal imaging equipment to scan for body heat. Nothing. Patterson had simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but his boots and a half-drunk cup of coffee. Chen wanted to shut down the operation immediately. Something took him. I don't know what, but something did. We need to evacuate until we understand what we're dealing with. Graves refused. He'd arrived with the morning supply helicopter and listened to our report with an expression that I couldn't quite read. Not shock, not exactly fear, something more like resignation. Patterson was unstable, he said. I reviewed his psychological evaluation after the fact. Family history of mental illness, some incidents of erratic behavior at university. He probably had an episode, wandered off, got disoriented. We'll find him. His boots, I started. Removed them because they were uncomfortable, or as part of a psychotic break, or for any number of reasons that don't involve assuming something supernatural took him. Graves's voice was firm. We're not shutting down a multi-million-dollar survey operation based on one missing person who most likely walked away on his own. Then we call in search and rescue, Miller said. Local authorities, helicopters, proper search teams. Tell them what? That one of our people vanished from a restricted site while conducting unauthorized research during non-work hours. That we've been operating here without proper permits from the Forestry Service. That we have military-grade security personnel carrying weapons in a civilian survey operation. Graves shook his head. We handle this internally. You have 48 hours to find Patterson. After that, we report it as an accident during a routine survey. Now get back to work. We didn't work. How could we? Patterson was gone, vanished, and Graves was clearly more concerned with covering it up than finding him. The team gathered in the mess hall, speaking in hushed voices, and I could see the fear spreading. It was Akoy who finally said what we were all thinking. We need to see the previous team's report. The real one, not the sanitized version Graves gave us. He'd been going through the files the night before Patterson disappeared. Now he pulled out a folder, paper documents, water-damaged but readable. I found these in a storage container that was marked for disposal. Partial records from the first survey team. Their lead geologist was named Dr. Sarah Vickers. She filed a preliminary report 3 weeks into their survey. He spread the pages on the table. The report was fragmentary, some pages missing, others barely legible. But what remained was chilling. Cannot recommend further investigation. Pattern suggests intelligence. Responsive behavior when approached. Lost 2 team members to illegible, emerging from vents during. Strongly advise military containment. Not geological formation. Something else. Been there for. The final page was a handwritten note, barely legible. They knew we were here the whole time. They were watching, waiting. Don't come back. Don't let anyone come back. Seal it. Bury it. Forget it exists. The note was dated November 3, 1986, 11 months ago. Graves knows, Sanders said quietly. He knows what happened to the first team and he sent us here anyway. But why? That was Park. What possible reason would justify? Because they want to know if it's still alive. Akoy's voice was flat. We're not here to survey, we're bait. They're using us to test whether whatever the first team encountered is still active. The implications settled over us like a shroud. Rodriguez stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. Then we leave, right now. We pack up and get out. With what? Miller gestured toward the communications tent. Graves controls the helicopter schedule. Next supply run isn't for 3 days. And even if we called for early pickup, he'd deny the request. Then we walk out. 40 miles to the nearest logging road. We can make that in 2 days. Through mountain terrain with limited supplies. In late September, when weather can turn deadly in hours. Yao shook his head. We'd be risking our lives. We're risking our lives staying here. The argument continued, voices rising. I noticed Chen had remained quiet, studying the fragmentary report. Finally, she spoke. We need to know what we're dealing with. If we're going to convince anyone, Graves, the authorities, anyone, we need evidence. Concrete data that proves there's a threat. You want to keep working? Rodriguez stared at her. After what happened to Patterson? I want to survive. And to do that, we need to understand what took him. She stood, gathering the papers. The previous team mentioned emerging from vents. That suggests physical entities, something we can document, record, potentially defend against. Tonight, I'm setting up cameras on all 17 vents. Infrared, motion activated. If something comes out, we'll have proof. It was insane. It was also logical, and in the absence of any other plan, we agreed. We spent the afternoon installing Chen's surveillance system. 17 cameras, positioned around the vents, each with battery backup and wireless transmission to a central recording station in the communications tent. We also installed additional lighting, portable floodlights powered by generators, positioned to illuminate the valley floor. Miller and Kovacs established additional security protocols. No one goes down to the valley floor alone, ever. Minimum teams of 3, always armed, always in radio contact. We set up a watch rotation, 2 people on duty at all times, monitoring the cameras and radios. Graves protested the security measures, but Miller overruled him. One of my people is missing. Until I know what happened to him, we operate under threat condition protocols. You can file a complaint with corporate when we get back to civilization. That night we gathered in the communications tent, all 11 of us remaining, watching the monitor feeds from the cameras. The valley floor was illuminated by our floodlights, casting harsh shadows but providing clear visibility. The vents breathed their regular 40-second rhythm, vapor rising and dissipating. Nothing happened. Hour after hour we watched. Shifts rotated, some people slept, others stayed glued to the monitors. I dozed fitfully in a chair, jerking awake every time someone moved or spoke. At 3:17 a.m., Vent 9 stopped breathing. Just that one. The others continued their regular pattern, but Vent 9 fell silent. On the infrared camera feed, its temperature signature changed. The opening cooled rapidly, dropping from 140 degrees to ambient temperature in less than 30 seconds. Something's blocking it, Chen whispered. From inside, something's plugging the vent. We watched, barely breathing ourselves. 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. The other vents continued their pattern, but Vent 9 remained dark and silent. Then it moved. I say it because my brain had no other referent. The thing that emerged from Vent 9 didn't fit any category I understood. It was stone, but it moved like flesh. It was massive, but it flowed like water. It had segments that could have been limbs or tools or sensory organs, but they reconfigured constantly, shape-shifting in response to some inner logic I couldn't fathom. The cameras captured it from multiple angles, roughly cylindrical, perhaps 8 feet in diameter and 20 feet long. The surface was dark, matching the stone of the valley floor, but it had a texture, grooves and ridges that spiraled along its length, like the machining marks in the tunnels, but on a living surface. It didn't have eyes that I could see, but it oriented toward the monitoring station where Patterson had been the night before, moved toward it with a lurching, undulating motion that covered ground faster than seemed possible given its bulk. Jesus Christ, someone whispered, maybe me. The thing reached the monitoring station and stopped. For several seconds, it remained motionless. Then segments along its body began to reconfigure, plates or scales or something sliding apart, revealing inner structures that glowed with that same blue-green bioluminescence we'd seen in the vapor. It's sensing, Chen said. Her voice was clinical, detached, the scientist in her trying to process the impossible. Those inner structures, they could be chemoreceptors or electromagnetic sensors or something we don't have a name for. It's examining the station, looking for. The thing flowed through the wall, not breaking it, not crushing it. The stone and metal simply parted around it like the material had become liquid. It entered the monitoring station, and we watched on the internal camera as it filled the space, segments reconfiguring to match the interior dimensions. It found Patterson's jacket. A segment extended, wrapped around the fabric and drew it into the main body mass. The jacket vanished, not torn or consumed, absorbed, integrated. Then the thing turned toward the camera. I say turned, but it didn't rotate, it reconfigured, what had been its rear becoming its front, and a new set of sensory structures emerged from its surface. They looked like eyes almost, clusters of what could have been lenses or crystals, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. It moved toward the camera, the image distorted, filled with static and strange colors that didn't belong in normal spectrum. Then the feed went black. Lost camera 4, Yao reported, and camera 7, and multiple cameras going offline. On the remaining feeds, we saw more of them. 5, 6, 7 shapes emerging from different vents, all similar in basic structure but varying in size and configuration. Some were smaller, perhaps 4 feet in diameter. Others were larger, easily 20 feet. They moved across the valley floor in coordinated patterns, examining our equipment, our sensor arrays, our monitoring station. They're intelligent, Akoy said. Look at how they're moving. That's not random exploration. They're investigating systematically. They're trying to understand us. Shut it down, Graves said suddenly. His face was pale, slick with sweat. Shut down all the lights, all the equipment, make it dark. Maybe they'll go back down. Or maybe they'll come up here, Miller countered. We're on high ground, we have visibility, we keep the lights on. But Graves was already moving toward the generator controls. This is my operation, and I'm ordering. Miller grabbed him, spun him around. You sent us here knowing what was down there. You knew about the first team. You knew about Vickers' report, and you sent us anyway. The board needed confirmation. We couldn't make decisions based on one possibly compromised survey. Graves was shaking, his voice rising toward hysteria. Do you understand what this could mean? What's down there could revolutionize everything we know about geology, about Earth's history, about how to get people killed. Miller shoved him toward a chair. Sit down, shut up. Kovacs, keep an eye on him. On the monitors, the things were leaving. One by one, they returned to their vents, flowing back down into the darkness. Within 15 minutes, the valley floor was clear again. All 17 vents resumed their normal breathing pattern, as if nothing had happened. But 3 more cameras had been destroyed or disabled. Our monitoring station was compromised, and we all understood now what we were dealing with. We have to leave, Park said. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. Tonight, now, before they come back. Agreed, said Sanders. We pack essential supplies, abandon the heavy equipment, and start hiking. 40 miles. We can do it. Chen was downloading camera footage onto multiple drives. We need this documentation. This proves everything. Proves what's down there, proves what happened to the first team, proves Cascadia knowingly endangered us. Will anyone believe it? Rodriguez asked. I watched it happen and I barely believe it. They'll have to believe it. This is evidence, scientific evidence. She finished the downloads, distributed drives to multiple team members. We each carry a copy. That way if something happens to one person, the others still have proof. We packed quickly, efficiently. Essential supplies only, water, food, medical kit, cold weather gear, radio equipment, GPS units. We left the heavy survey equipment, the prefab structures, everything that would slow us down. Miller and Kovacs distributed weapons against regulations, but no one was following regulations anymore. We each got a flare gun, and Miller had a pistol he'd been carrying concealed. It was 4:30 a.m. when we started out. 11 people moving single file through the forest, using headlamps to navigate the rough terrain. Miller led, with Kovacs at the rear. Standard tactical movement formation. The forest was silent. Not naturally silent, absolutely silent. No insects, no birds, no small mammals rustling in the undergrowth. Just our footsteps and breathing, our equipment rustling, our voices when someone needed to communicate. We made good time at first. The terrain was challenging but manageable, and we were motivated by pure survival instinct. As dawn broke, we stopped for a brief rest, shared water and energy bars, checked our position on GPS. 22 miles to go. Rodriguez was tending to blisters. Several team members were already showing signs of the hard march. Chen's ankle was swollen from a misstep in the dark. Yao was limping, though he insisted he was fine. But we were alive, we were moving, and every mile put distance between us and that valley. We started moving again at 7:00 a.m. The forest had grown lighter, easier to navigate. But that silence persisted, and now I noticed something else. The trees were wrong. Not dead, but altered. The bark had textures I didn't remember seeing before, patterns that seemed too regular. The leaves moved in unison despite the lack of wind, as if coordinated by something beneath the surface. "Don't touch the trees," Akoy said quietly. He'd noticed it too. "Something's wrong with them." We maintained distance from the tree trunks, moving in the spaces between them. The GPS showed we were still on course, heading west-northwest toward the logging roads. 18 miles to go. At 9:43 a.m., Sanders disappeared. He was walking in the middle of the column between Park and Yao. I was 6 people ahead, helping Chen navigate with her swollen ankle. I heard a sound, not a scream, not quite. A surprised grunt suddenly cut off. We turned. Sanders was gone. Park stood frozen, staring at the ground where he'd been walking just seconds before. The earth showed no disturbance, no indication that anything had happened. Park's voice failed. She tried again. He was there, and then the ground it wasn't ground anymore. It was like looking through water. He fell through and it closed up, and he's just gone. We examined the spot. Solid earth covered in typical forest detritus, fallen leaves, moss, small stones. I stamped on it. Hard, stable, nothing. "Keep moving," Miller said. "Stay together. Watch the ground. If it starts to look strange or move or anything, call out immediately." We moved faster now, fear driving us. The GPS showed 16 miles remaining. We could make that before dark if we maintained pace. We could survive this. At 11:20 a.m., the forest ended. Not gradually, abruptly. We reached a line where the trees simply stopped, and beyond them was bare stone. Dark, smooth stone that looked exactly like the valley floor we'd left behind. "This isn't on the maps," Chen said, studying her GPS. "There shouldn't be any exposed stone formations in this area. It's all forested mountain range." But there it was, an expanse of stone stretching for at least a quarter mile in every direction. And on that stone, arranged in a familiar pattern, were 17 vents. "No," Park said. "No, that's impossible. We walked all night and morning. We're miles from the original site." "Or we walked in a circle," Yao said, but his voice carried no conviction. We all knew better. Akoy pulled out a compass. The needle spun wildly, unable to settle on any direction. He tried the GPS. The screen showed corrupted data, coordinates that made no sense, altitude readings that fluctuated wildly. "It's not letting us leave," Rodriguez said. "It brought us back." "Then we try again," Miller said. "Different direction, south toward the coast. 20 miles through forest, we hit Highway 101. We can do 20 miles. We turned south, started walking. The forest reformed around us, trees growing from bare stone as we watched, branches extending, leaves unfurling. Not slowly, rapidly, impossibly, defying every law of biology and physics. Within minutes, we were back in dense forest, surrounded by trees that had just been bare stone. We walked for 3 hours. When we emerged from the forest, we found ourselves at another expanse of stone with 17 vents arranged in a spiral pattern. "It's the same vents," Chen said. She'd been marking them with her camera, documenting their configuration. "Look, vent 7 is the one that damaged earlier. You can see where our monitoring station was positioned. This is the original site." "Then we try east," Kovacs said. "Or north. We keep trying until we find a way out." But we all knew. I could see it in everyone's faces. We weren't going to find a way out. Whatever this was, this thing that lived beneath the earth, that breathed through 17 mouths, that could reshape stone and manipulate space itself, it had decided we weren't leaving. We made camp on the ridge, the same position where our base camp had been. The structures were gone, absorbed perhaps, or simply erased. We huddled together, sharing body heat, rationing our supplies. Miller and Kovacs stood watch, weapons ready, though we all understood that weapons would be useless against what we faced. As darkness fell, the vents began their breathing pattern. But faster now, every 20 seconds instead of 40, and the vapor columns glowed with that blue-green bioluminescence, bright enough to illuminate the valley floor. "They're waking up," Akoy said. "Fully. Whatever we did, our surveys, our sensors, our presence, we activated something. Woke something that had been dormant, and now it's aware of us." At midnight they emerged. All 17 vents simultaneously. Not the smaller things we'd seen before, something larger, much larger. Shapes that rose from the tunnels like pillars of living stone, 30 feet tall, 40 feet, still growing. They moved in synchronized patterns, segments flowing and reconfiguring, and that blue-green light pulsed from internal structures. "It's not 17 separate entities," Chen said. She was documenting everything, camera running despite the terror. "It's one organism with 17 access points. We're not looking at creatures emerging from tunnels. We're looking at parts of something massive that exists underneath the entire valley, maybe underneath the entire mountain range. The vents are just apertures, places where it can extend portions of itself to the surface." The implications were staggering. We weren't dealing with organisms that lived underground. We were standing on top of something that had been there long before the mountains formed, long before forests grew, possibly before life itself had colonized the land. "How do we fight that?" Rodriguez's voice was small, broken. "We don't," Akoy said. "We survive it or we don't." The things were approaching the ridge now, moving up the slope with that impossible flowing motion. Miller fired his pistol, 3 shots, center mass on the nearest one. The bullets struck, embedding in the stone flesh, and immediately the material flowed around them, absorbing them, negating their impact. "Run," he said, "just fucking run." We scattered into the forest, moving in different directions. Tactical mistake, but panic overrides training. I ran with Chen and Rodriguez, crashing through undergrowth, branches whipping our faces. Behind us, those things followed. Not quickly, they didn't need to be quick. The forest itself was working against us. Roots reached up, catching our feet. Branches bent to block our path. The ground became unstable, soft in places, hard in others, forcing us to slow, to choose each step carefully. And all the while, those things flowed closer, patient, inevitable. Rodriguez went down first. We were crossing a small clearing when the ground beneath him simply opened, not cracking, not collapsing, opening like a mouth. He fell through, screaming, and I grabbed for him, caught his hand. For 1 second I held on, felt his weight, his fingers digging into my palm with desperate strength. Then the earth closed, not gradually, instantly. His hand was just gone, severed clean, as if it had never been attached to anything. I stood there holding empty air, my palm bloody, staring at the ground that had just consumed him. Chen pulled me away. "Move, we have to move." We ran. How long, I don't know. Time had become meaningless, elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that defied measurement. We might have run for minutes or hours. The forest changed around us, sometimes dense, sometimes open, sometimes barely recognizable as forest at all. We found Kovacs, or what was left of him. He was partially embedded in a tree trunk, his body half merged with the wood and bark. Still alive. His eyes tracked us, his mouth moved, but no sound came out. The tree's roots extended from his chest, his legs growing into the forest floor. He was being integrated, transformed into part of the landscape. Chen photographed it. I know that sounds cold, but she photographed it, documenting even this horror because evidence was our only weapon. Then we kept moving because there was nothing we could do for him. We found the valley again. Of course we did. All paths led back to it, no matter which direction we chose. The ridge, the vents, the dark stone floor. Other survivors were there, Miller, Park, Yao, Thompson. 7 of us left from the original 12. Graves was there too. He sat at the edge of the ridge, staring down into the valley, and he was laughing. Quiet, broken laughter that might have been sobs. They contacted us 6 months ago, he said. His voice was distant, disconnected. Not Cascadia, them. Through seismic signals, through electromagnetic pulses that our monitoring stations picked up. Patterns in the data that couldn't be natural. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers. They wanted us to know they were there. Wanted us to come investigate. Why? Miller asked. To understand us, to see if we were suitable, he laughed again. The first team wasn't suitable. Wrong biological composition, wrong neural structure, something. So they let them leave, let them report, let them warn others away. But we're different. You, me, all of us. We're compatible somehow. That's why they're not killing us quickly. They're studying us, learning from us. They're going to integrate us the way they integrated Kovacs, make us part of themselves. There has to be a way to fight this, Park said. Some weakness, some. It's 1 billion years old, Graves said. It was here before vertebrates existed, before plants colonized land, before the mountains rose. It's been sleeping, dormant, and we woke it up with our drilling and mining and fracking. We poked holes in its shell, and now it's awake and curious and hungry. He stood up, walked to the very edge of the ridge. I'm not going to wait for it to take me. I'm not going to be studied and integrated and made into part of some ancient thing that thinks we're interesting specimens. Miller lunged for him, but too late. Graves stepped off the edge, falling 40 feet to the stone below. His body hit with a sound I'll never forget, not quite the normal sound of impact. The stone absorbed him, flowed around him, and within seconds he was gone, pulled beneath the surface like he'd fallen into water. The rest of us stood there in shock. Then Park started laughing, the same broken sound Graves had made. He got out. That's the only way out, don't you see? It can't integrate us if we're already dead. No, Chen said firmly. We document, we survive. We get this evidence back to civilization. That's our duty. To who? Park pulled out her flare gun. Who's going to believe this? Who's going to do anything? There's a 1 billion-year-old organism under California that can reshape matter and manipulate space, and you think anyone's going to stop it? She put the flare gun to her head. Miller tried to stop her, but she pulled the trigger first. The flare punched through her skull and her body collapsed. The stone beneath her began to flow, reaching up, pulling her down, but Miller dragged her away, kept her body on stable ground. We bury her, he said. We bury her properly because she was one of ours. But we didn't have time. The things were emerging again, and now there were more of them. Not just from the 17 vents, from the ground itself, from the trees, from the air. Pieces of the entity manifesting in whatever form it needed, surrounding us, studying us. One of them approached Chen. She stood her ground, camera running, documenting everything even as tendrils of living stone extended toward her. They wrapped around her arms, her legs, gentle almost. She didn't scream. Just kept the camera aimed, kept recording, even as they lifted her off the ground. Upload the footage, she called to me. Her voice was steady, professional. The satellite link in the communications tent. Upload everything before they destroy it. Then the tendrils pulled her into the main body mass and she was gone, absorbed, integrated, made part of something vast and incomprehensible. Miller grabbed me, Yao and Thompson. Communications tent. Now we do what she said. We ran. The tent was still standing, miraculously, impossibly. We got inside and Miller barricaded the door while I fired up the satellite uplink. It took 90 seconds to establish connection, the longest 90 seconds of my life. Outside, those things flowed around the tent, testing its boundaries, and the walls began to soften and deform. The connection established. I started uploading camera footage, seismic data, Chen's analysis, everything. The satellite link was slow, designed for text and small data files, not video. I watched the progress bar crawl forward, 10%, 15%. Something came through the tent wall, not tearing it, flowing through it like it was liquid. Thompson screamed and ran, and it caught him, wrapped around him, lifted him up. His body went rigid, and I saw his eyes glaze over, consciousness fading as whatever it was did something to his neural system. 25%, 30%. Miller was firing his pistol, but it was useless. More of them were coming through the walls now, the floor, the ceiling. Yao backed into a corner, flare gun raised, and when they reached for him, he pulled the trigger. The flare ignited at point-blank range, burning through the thing's mass. It recoiled, and for one moment I saw something like pain or surprise in the way its segments reorganized. Fire, they don't like fire. 50%, 60%. Miller, I pointed to the tent's support structure. Aluminum poles, fabric walls, all highly flammable. He understood immediately. We had 3 flares left between us. We fired them simultaneously into the tent's corner supports. The fabric ignited instantly, flames spreading across the material. The things recoiled, withdrawing through the walls, leaving Thompson's unconscious body behind. But the fire was spreading fast, and we had seconds before the entire structure collapsed. 75%, 85%. Come on, come on, come on, I muttered, watching the upload progress. The heat was intense now, smoke filling the tent, flames consuming the walls. 95%, 98%. 100%, upload complete. Go, Miller hauled me to my feet, grabbed Thompson's body, and we stumbled out of the burning tent. The things were everywhere, but the fire had given them pause. We ran, carrying Thompson between us, Yao limping behind us with his burned hands clutched to his chest. We made it to the tree line before they regrouped and came after us again. But now we had a strategy. We set fire to the forest. It was insane. Starting a wildfire in old-growth forest, miles from any fire break or water source. But it was our only weapon. Yao still had 1 flare. He fired it into dry undergrowth, and the flames caught, spreading rapidly through the accumulated duff and dead wood. The things pulled back from the flames. Not far, they could probably survive the heat, but the fire disrupted them somehow, interfered with their ability to reshape matter or manipulate space. We used that. We ran ahead of the fire, let it chase us, used it as a moving barrier between us and them. We ran for hours. The forest burned behind us, and the things followed at the edge of the flames, keeping pace but unable to close distance. Thompson regained consciousness around midday, disoriented and confused but mobile. We kept moving. At some point, I can't say when, time had lost all meaning, the forest ended. Real forest this time, not the manipulated space we'd been trapped in. We emerged onto a dirt road, and in the distance I could see the smoke from the fire we'd started, a massive column rising into the sky. A logging truck stopped for us. The driver took one look at our burned clothes, our injuries, our eyes, and radioed for help. Forest Service arrived within an hour, then paramedics, then police. We told them about the fire, didn't mention how it started, said we'd been doing a geological survey, got caught in a wildfire, barely escaped. 4 survivors out of 12. The others were lost in the fire, we said. Burned. Gone. They believed us because what else could they believe? The fire burned for 6 days, consuming 17,000 acres of old-growth forest. By the time it was contained, the valley was gone, buried under tons of ash and burned timber, the vents sealed by debris flows and collapsed terrain. But I know it survived. Something that old, that massive, doesn't die from a forest fire. We just made it angry. Men in suits arrived at the hospital on the 3rd day. Not Forest Service, not police. They had government identification that seemed official but belonged to agencies I'd never heard of. They separated us, me, Miller, Yao, Thompson, and they interviewed us individually. They showed us documents to sign, NDAs with criminal penalties attached. They explained that we'd experienced a tragic accident during a routine geological survey. Methane leak from a previously unknown geothermal system, causing mass hallucination and disorientation. 9 fatalities: Patterson, Sanders, Rodriguez, Kovacs, Graves, Chen, Park, Hendricks, Marcus. All died in the subsequent wildfire while trying to evacuate. They showed me death certificates, carbon monoxide poisoning for some, burns for others, all dated to correspond with the official timeline of events, all signed by doctors I'd never met. They offered compensation, substantial compensation, 6 figures each, with the understanding that we would never discuss what really happened, that we would accept the official narrative, that we would forget. I signed. What choice did I have? Who would believe the truth? I'd watched it happen, lived through it, and I could barely believe it myself. Miller signed too, but something broke in him that day. The doctors called it PTSD, gave him medication, recommended therapy, but I knew better. Part of him was still in that valley, still fighting things that couldn't be fought. He never spoke again after the interviews. Not a word. Just sat in VA hospitals, staring at nothing, occasionally drawing the same 17 circles in spiral patterns. Yao lasted longer. He took his compensation, moved to Alaska, tried to start over, but the nightmares followed him. Every night, he told his therapist, he dreamed of being pulled underground, of becoming part of something vast and ancient. He drove his car off a cliff 2 years after the incident. Single vehicle accident, no witnesses. The police called it suicide. They were probably right. Thompson held on the longest. He went back to school, got a doctorate in geophysics, became a professor. He never talked about what happened, not even to me. But I heard from colleagues that he'd become obsessed with seismic monitoring, tracking earthquake patterns, looking for signs of something. He died in his office 5 years ago. Heart attack, the official report said. But his research assistant told me he'd been tracking a series of minor tremors in Northern California, small earthquakes arranged in a pattern that looked mathematically significant. He just finished plotting them when he collapsed. The pattern was a spiral, 17 points around a central location. Miller died in the VA hospital last year. He was 74, had spent 36 years in institutional care, never speaking, never acknowledging anyone around him. The nurse who called me said he'd spent his final days drawing. The same drawing over and over. She sent me a copy, thought I might want it. I burned it immediately, but I remember it perfectly. 17 circles arranged in a logarithmic spiral, and in the center, written in shaky handwriting, still breathing. I'm 73 years old now, the last survivor, the last witness to what we found and what found us in that valley. I've spent 37 years watching, waiting, tracking the signs. The official record says the valley was destroyed in the fire, the geothermal system sealed by debris flows and geological collapse. Cascadia Geothermal Solutions went bankrupt 2 years after the incident, dismantled and absorbed by larger corporations. All records of the Mendocino survey were sealed under federal classification that I don't have clearance to even ask about. But I track the seismic data. I have alerts set up for earthquake activity in the King Range. And every few years there it is, a minor tremor, magnitude 3 or 4, epicenter 3,000 feet below what used to be that valley, always accompanied by smaller tremors arranged in a 17-point spiral pattern around the central event. It's still there, still alive, still breathing. And it's not alone. Over the past 3 decades, I've tracked similar patterns in other locations, remote sites, usually in seismically active regions where survey teams have reported anomalies, equipment malfunctions, missing personnel, geological formations that don't follow the rules. There was an incident in Alaska in 1993, mining operation, 27 workers all vanished overnight. An oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico in 2004, structural collapse attributed to methane hydrate destabilization, but the survivors' accounts mentioned things emerging from the sea floor. A geothermal project in Iceland in 2011, shut down due to unexpected geological hazards, though witnesses described responsive behavior from the drilling sites. Different locations, different entities perhaps, but similar patterns, similar responses when disturbed. We're not alone on this planet. We never have been. We just assumed we were because the things that were here first have been sleeping, dormant, sealed beneath the Earth's crust in the deep ocean, in places we're only now reaching with our technology. And we keep waking them up. Every deep mine, every fracking operation, every geothermal project, every oil well, we're drilling into a world we don't understand, poking holes in systems that have been stable for hundreds of millions of years. We're making noise in a house where ancient things are sleeping. And they're starting to wake up. I still feel the pressure changes in my joints when storms roll in. The doctors prescribe painkillers. They don't help. The pain isn't in my bones, it's in the memory of what my bones felt, standing on top of something vast and old that had decided to notice us. I still smell that electric organic scent in my dreams, wake up gasping with the certainty that something is breathing beneath my house, beneath my city, beneath the thin shell of civilization we've built on top of a planet we don't really understand. I still hear Chen's voice, calm and professional, even as those things pulled her apart to see how she worked. Upload the footage. I did. I sent it all, every video, every data file, every analysis. Sent it to government agencies, scientific organizations, news outlets. Know what happened? Nothing. Some people claimed it was fabricated. Others said it was too classified to discuss. Most just ignored it. Because what can you do with evidence of something like that? How do you fight entities that existed before multicellular life evolved, that can reshape matter and manipulate space, that might be connected in networks spanning continents? You can't, so you ignore it, you file it away, you classify it, you hope it goes back to sleep. But it won't. So here's my warning, and I'm being as specific as I can be because you need to understand. If you're working in resource extraction, mining, drilling, geothermal, fracking, and you encounter geological formations that are too precise, too regular, too mathematical, stop immediately. Document everything and leave. Don't wait for authorization, don't worry about your contract, just leave. If you see patterns in rock formations that suggest deliberate construction or organization, especially spiral or geometric patterns, do not investigate further. Mark the location, report it to every authority you can reach, and stay away. If you're in a remote location and experience equipment malfunctions that don't have clear mechanical causes, compasses spinning, GPS failing, radio interference in regular pulses, seismic sensors showing rhythmic patterns, evacuate immediately. Don't try to troubleshoot. Don't try to adapt. Just get out. If the ground seems to breathe, if stone moves like flesh, if space itself feels wrong or stretched or looped, you are standing on top of something that has noticed you. Leave everything and run. Fire might buy you time, but only time. Nothing we have can truly fight these things. If team members start disappearing, especially if their belongings are left behind in organized ways, you are being studied. They're trying to understand you, Figure out if you're suitable for integration. Don't let yourself be the last test subject. If anyone in authority tells you to stay despite obvious danger, they either don't understand what you're facing or they're using you as bait to gather information. Trust your instincts over their orders. Most importantly, if you find evidence of a previous team that abandoned a site with strong warnings, believe them. Don't assume they panicked or were incompetent. They survived something you haven't encountered yet, and their warnings come from experience you don't want to duplicate. I'm 73 years old. My daughter is looking into assisted living facilities because she thinks I'm losing my mind. She found me with my ear pressed to the concrete floor, listening. I told her I thought there was a water leak. The truth is, I was listening for that rhythmic pulse. 40 seconds apart used to be the pattern. Now it's faster, every 35 seconds in some locations, every 30 in others, like a heartbeat slowly accelerating, like something massive gradually waking up. I keep maps on my walls, tracking seismic patterns, documenting unusual geological events, correlating missing persons reports from remote industrial sites. My daughter thinks it's the paranoia of an old man who experienced trauma. She doesn't see the patterns I see. The 17-point spirals showing up in data from Alaska, Chile, Indonesia, Iceland. The increasing frequency of geological accidents at deep drilling sites. The growing number of abandoned projects where official reports cite unexpected complications, but survivor accounts mention things they can't explain. It's spreading, or maybe it was always everywhere and we're just now reaching the depths where we encounter it. Either way, the frequency is increasing. The encounters are becoming more common, and every time we disturb one, we risk waking others. Chen uploaded the footage. Somewhere in some database that evidence exists. Video of things that shouldn't exist, entities that defy physics and biology, proof that Earth has always been occupied by something far older than us. But it hasn't changed anything. We're still drilling, still mining, still fracking, still pushing deeper into the planet's crust in search of resources and profit. We're still disturbing things that should be left alone. Patterson was 24 when they took him, just a kid with dreams and enthusiasm and a whole life ahead of him. Rodriguez was 26, always moving, always trying to outpace his anxiety. Sanders, Kovacs, Graves, Chen, Park, Hendricks, Marcus, all of them had lives, families, futures. Now they're part of something else, integrated, studied, maybe aware, maybe not. I hope not. I hope whatever happens when those things absorb you is quick and final, not some eternal consciousness trapped in alien flesh stone. But I don't know. I can't know. And that uncertainty haunts me more than the confirmed deaths. Miller spent 36 years silent, drawing patterns that meant something only to him. What was he trying to tell us? What did he understand that he couldn't articulate? I'm the last one now. When I die, the story dies with me. My daughter will clean out my apartment, throw away my maps and my data and my files. She'll read my journals and think they're the ravings of a traumatized old man. She won't believe any of it. But I'm writing this anyway, documenting it one final time, because maybe someone will read it who needs to know. Someone working a deep survey in remote terrain. Someone who notices their equipment acting strange, their colleagues disappearing, the ground breathing beneath their feet. If that's you, if you're reading this and recognizing the signs, then listen carefully. You can't fight it. You can't negotiate with something that doesn't think the way you do, that existed before human consciousness evolved. Your best hope, your only hope, is to recognize the warning signs early and leave before it decides you're interesting enough to study. Document everything if you can. Upload it, distribute it, make copies. Not because anyone will necessarily believe you, but because the evidence needs to exist. Each piece of documentation adds to the larger picture, helps build the case that something is down there. But prioritize survival over documentation. Don't die trying to prove what happened. Live to warn others, even if they don't believe you. And know that if you make it out, you'll carry it with you forever. The memory of what you saw, the knowledge of what exists beneath us, the understanding that Earth isn't really our planet. We're just recent tenants in a house with very old foundations. I'm 73 years old, and I still feel 17 synchronized pulses in my chest when I close my eyes at night. Still hear Chen's calm voice telling me to upload the footage. Still smell that electric organic scent that means something ancient is breathing nearby. Still track the seismic data showing 17-point spiral patterns appearing in locations around the world. Still wait for the day when the breathing pattern finally reaches 0 seconds between cycles, when whatever's down there fully wakes up and decides it's time to reclaim the surface. I don't know how much time we have. Years maybe, decades if we're lucky, but every deep hole we drill, every mountain we tunnel through, every geothermal reservoir we tap into, we're rolling dice with something we don't understand. And eventually, our luck will run out. The valley is still there, somewhere under the ash and regrowth. The vents are still there, sealed but not destroyed. And the thing that breathed through them is still there, 3,000 feet down, waiting with the patience of something that measures time in geological epochs. We disturbed it once. We'll disturb it again. We'll disturb others like it, because we can't help ourselves. We need the resources, need the energy, need to keep expanding and exploiting and pushing deeper. And they're down there waiting, patient, ancient, curious about these brief, fragile things that walk on their shell and make so much noise. I'm writing this in November 2024. I'll be 74 next month. The doctors say my heart is weak, that I should get my affairs in order. My daughter is already planning the funeral, selecting a cremation service, choosing which photos to display. Let her, I'm ready. 37 years of watching and waiting and remembering is enough. 37 years of tracking patterns and seeing the warning signs that no one else wants to acknowledge. But before I go, I need someone to know, need someone to understand, need someone to keep watching, keep tracking, keep warning others even when they don't want to hear it. That's you now. You're reading this, which means you were looking for answers. Maybe you experienced something you can't explain. Maybe you lost someone to circumstances that don't add up. Maybe you just have a feeling that something's wrong beneath the surface of official reports and sanitized explanations. Trust that feeling. Trust your instincts. They evolved over millions of years to keep you alive, to recognize danger even when you can't articulate what the danger is. And remember this, we're not alone on this planet. We never have been. The things that were here first are still here, beneath the surface, in the deep places we're only now reaching. And we keep waking them up. God help us all when they fully awake. This is my testimony, my final documentation, the truth about what we disturbed in that valley in 1987 and what's still down there, breathing through 17 mouths arranged in a spiral pattern that follows the golden ratio. My name is James Walsh. I was a structural engineer with Cascadia Geothermal Solutions. I survived something that shouldn't exist, and I've spent 37 years trying to warn anyone who would listen. Now I'm leaving that responsibility to you. Pay attention to the patterns, watch for the warning signs, and for the love of everything you hold dear, if you see 17 vents arranged in a spiral, run. Run and don't look back. Because what we disturbed is still down there. And it's still breathing.